Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, back again, and it's Doctor Who Magazine Day, and it's the big Doctor Who Magazine spectacular that comes just before we have new Doctor Who on our screens. Now, as always, when we discuss elements from published physical media, we are not going to be going through page by page of this entire issue of Doctor Who Magazine. We are just going to cover a little snippet of what is in this jam-packed edition, so I would recommend that if you do want all of the information, all of the details, that you go and get your hands on a copy of Doctor Who magazine. Let's support physical media, people. Also, there will be timestamps on this video, so if you want to kind of jump about to different sections, then that will be an option for you. So just quickly, before we get into the bulk of what we want to discuss, let's just address the cover of this edition. On the cover, we have the four Beatles and the Doctor and Ruby. Obviously, because in The Devil's Cord, we know that it's focused around the Beatles. There have been a lot of rather negative comments and responses to the Beatles' appearance on this cover. A lot of people saying they look like the kind of discount versions of the Beatles. Quite harsh. Do I think they look like the Beatles? Facially, no, I don't think they look like the Beatles. However, I don't think Olivia Colman looks anything like the Queen. But it didn't stop me from watching and enjoying her seasons of The Crown. You know, this isn't a biopic about the Beatles. This is Doctor Who, and I don't think the accuracy of the resemblance to how the Beatles look was their main priority with regards to this story. So I don't think it will take anything away from the story. I don't think it will distract me too much, because I know that this is not what the point of this episode is about. Who knows? Maybe they've done it on purpose. Maybe there's a reason for it, or maybe they're just the right actors for the roles, for other reasons. But anyway, let's move on. So this latest issue has previews for the first 3 episodes of Season 1. So that's Space Babies, The Devil's Cord, and Boom. So first of all, let's talk about Space Babies, because we now have a little bit more information about what the hell is going on in this episode. So there's also a little synopsis attached to each preview. So let's just have a look at what it says for Space Babies. They're hurtling off to the year 21,506 and a space station with a surprisingly fresh-faced crew. All aboard the baby farm. Ruby and the Doctor find a mysterious captain who's been waiting for them patiently. So in the preview, Russell T Davies also mentions a baby farm run by babies. We knew that this was going to be a bit of a weird one. I don't know if we expected it to be this weird, though. I mean, a baby farm run by babies. It's probably actually quite a brave premise to kick off this brand new reboot. I know it's not a reboot, but just for lack of a better word. You know, you can imagine that other creatives launching a refresh of their show might want to play it a little bit more basic, a little bit more safe, but it's clear here that Russell T Davies wants to set the tone right from the get-go. He's going, oh, you're new to the show, are you? Well, great, here's the Doctor, here's Doctor Who, and it's just weird. It's just weird and glorious, and just enjoy, basically. He doesn't care. He's not playing it safe, he's just going for it. So as for this mysterious captain, well, I guess we probably could assume that it is Golda Rochevelle's character Jocelyn. Although, I don't know, I wouldn't put it past them to throw a spanner in the works and for one of the babies to be the captain. Maybe the one that goes, "It's you," in the trailer. I just like doing the voice. It's also very interesting that it suggests here that this captain has been waiting for the arrival of Ruby and the Doctor. That's very interesting. It kind of gives the implication that the Doctor and Ruby are connected to this situation in somehow. They're tied to the events that are happening here. And actually, while we're on that topic, we actually have another video coming out very, very soon, which is all about some of the craziest theories we have for Season 1 so far, or that we've seen for Season 1 so far, and spoiler alert, one of those entries is that Ruby is a space baby. Now sure, look, I'm not saying that's definitely a thing. In fact, it's probably highly unlikely. But if you tie in the idea that the captain's been waiting for them, the line, "It's you," you know, we all assume it's the Doctor they're talking to, but it could very well be Ruby. And then we also tie it into something that Russell T Davies said, which was, it's also the personal story of Ruby finding out who she is and where she's from. You never know. You never know. Do I think Ruby really is a space baby? No, it's probably more of a kind of thematic link here. There's probably going to be lots of parallels drawn between the fact that the Doctor was adopted, Ruby was adopted, and the fact that these babies presumably have no knowledge of their parents or their origin. Overall, though, this definitely seems to be a very strange episode. I think there's a lot more going on in this episode than we initially thought, but a space baby farm run by space babies? Pfft, sign me up. I'm intrigued. You've gripped me. Let's see what happens. Okay, so moving on to the Devil's Cord, we now have confirmation, and some of you might have seen this floating around for the last week or so. I was in the midst of being very, very poorly and completely missed it, and then when Danny said it, I was like, wait, what have I missed? But we now have confirmation that Jinkx Monsoon is playing a character called Maestro, and she's the god of music. Also, she can emerge from within pianos. Now, I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but that was a theory that I had a couple of weeks ago with regards to one of the trailers. So, gold star for me, because I was right. Danny said she's behind the piano. I said, nah, she's coming from within the piano. And who was right? I was right. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maestro equals master. A lot of people have made this connection. We also know that the Master is floating around somewhere. We've had this whole tease with the gold tooth. I highly doubt that this character in particular is the Master. For one thing, the Master has no connection to music, apart from obviously the 4-beat rhythm. The Master's not the god of music, has no control over music, can't use music as a weapon, unless they've had like some super upgrade in disguise since the last time we saw them. But I don't think it works. And quite honestly, the more exciting really actually here is who is Maestro working for? Because her line in the trailer, she goes, "You called?" Who called her? Who summoned her? Why is she here? There's definitely more going on here than meets the eye, and I don't think the Maestro is working alone. Then the question is, who is she working with? Is it the one who waits? Is it Mrs. Flood? Is it Susan Twist? Or any other of the many, many mysterious characters we seem to have at the moment? So moving on now to episode 3, which is Boom. Okay, so the specifics of the plot for this episode still very much largely kept under wraps. We don't know much more than we already did. I mean, the magazine preview, it does mention that there's a war and a battlefield, but that's not really news to us. We kind of already assumed that from what we've seen so far. But what was very interesting about this episode in particular is that they've now confirmed that for this episode they used the Star Wars stagecraft technology while filming it. So this is what the magazine actually said. Boom also marks a significant first for Doctor Who through its use of in-camera VFX technology to create the episode's stunning alien landscape. The technique used extensively on productions like the Batman and the Star Wars TV shows replaces the traditional green screen process with a vast bank of LED screens. So you've probably already seen lots of the behind-the-scenes footage before with regards to this technology, but if you're not familiar with it, basically this technology came into prominence with the first season of The Mandalorian, which was back in 2019, and it's been used then on every single Disney Star Wars show since. Star Wars show since. Star War. Just one war. Just one Star War. So basically, instead of using a giant green screen or the blue screens or, you know, what you're used to seeing on backlots and things like that, the environment is basically displayed on these huge screens, so actually the actors can see what they're actually supposed to be looking at rather than trying to imagine what's there when in actual reality it's just a big green screen. It also then means that the cameras can catch in real time rather than adding it in via CGI in post-production. So obviously there are a lot of benefits to this. Obviously it saves a lot of money compared to setting up a location shoot or creating a landscape from scratch digitally afterwards. And in theory it kind of helps the actors because, like I said, they can see what's actually in front of them, and therefore I would assume that allows for a more authentic performance. Having said that, it is not perfect. It's definitely not perfect. So obviously you don't get the same amount of kind of depth as you would from a real environment. And particularly with regards to the Star Wars shows, it's kind of been relied on so heavily and kind of overused to the point where it's actually quite easy to tell when it's in use, and it can actually bring you out of the story a little bit. But if you use it sparingly, it can absolutely be great. With regards to the shots that we've seen so far of Boom, they all look really, really good. And as far as I can figure out, you can't tell that the actors are stood in front of these giant TV screens. It looks like they're on some sort of battlefield on an alien planet. Plus the thing is as well as we know, and I've spoken about this extensively, that Doctor Who still relies heavily on practical effects and using real locations. Many a quarry have been used in Doctor Who's history. So I don't think we need to worry too much that suddenly this sort of technology is going to be overused or that practical practical effects are going to suddenly disappear. It's just basically another benefit we're seeing from the increased budget that Doctor Who now has, and the fact that they are able to use these technologies if and when the situation requires it, just allows for them to create an even greater show. And as we've seen, like I said, they are still very much using practical effects and real locations when they can. So we know that this wouldn't have been a decision that they've made lightly, and that it would be chosen because it will benefit the episode the greatest. It will be the most beneficial to the episode. To be honest, I think, you know, if the choices are use this great new technology or use the green screen, I would rather the episode look great. You know I've said before the hokiness is what makes Doctor Who, but I've recently rewatched, what episode did I rewatch? I think it was the Lazarus Experiment, which, you know, we all know was not great for its CGI effects. And I think while to me that's nostalgic and it's part of the experience of watching Doctor Who in 2007 or whenever that series aired, to a new audience, that's not going to cut it. So given the choice, yes, practical effects as far as you can, but when you're weighing up using green screen technology or this really cool stuff that you actually have the budget to be able to use now, why not go for the better option? It's a no-brainer, really. Okay, so let's step away from the episodes themselves just for a moment, because one of the other great things about Doctor Who magazine is in every single edition, Russell T Davies writes a letter, and it's usually kind of full of these cheeky teases and behind-the-scenes gossip, basically. And this month has been absolutely no different, only this time the letter also talks about and kind of almost defends the choice or the decision to make Doctor Who a midnight streaming event on BBC iPlayer versus obviously the traditional TV broadcast that we're all used to, which has been the case for the last 60 years of the show. So the letter itself is quite extensive, and as I've said, get your hands on a copy of the magazine if you want to read the whole thing, but here is one of the key quotes that I want to just mention. That's the point. Choice. You're not having to change your habits to fit the show is changing to fit you, and it's changing to adopt the patterns of all modern TV shows. Yes, I think all of them very soon. This is the future, and it's here, right now. In other words, everyone that's involved has basically looked at the kind of current landscape of television and the dominance of streaming and the decline of kind of linear television, and made the decision that Doctor Who, first and foremost, will be a streaming show. So previously we've actually discussed how Russell T Davies has been a big advocate for linear television. But it seems now that he's kind of just thrown in the towel and admitted defeat and gone, you know what? Streaming is the future. I mean, look what he literally says here. This is the future for all modern TV shows. So, you know, previously we kind of got under the impression that they're still touting the idea that you can still watch Doctor Who, you know, at a fixed time on a Saturday evening, just the same as always. But now, judging by what he said here, it kind of feels a little bit obvious that that was perhaps maybe a bit of an afterthought. It was, you know, streaming is the way forward. We'll still do that. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if in the future, the BBC broadcast on a Saturday evening disappeared entirely. I'm not saying I want that to happen. You know, again, it's part of the nostalgia for me of watching Doctor Who. But judging by what's being said here, and just the nature of the progression of television now, you cannot deny that streaming is the way forward. And for a show like Doctor Who to continue, they need to get with the times. And streaming is the way to do that. So Russell did also go on to acknowledge the fact that yes, there are obviously greater risks of spoilers because of this, especially for people who use social media for work or cannot avoid using social media before they have a chance to watch the episode. And one of the great things about Russell is he is very in touch with the fans, and so it is good to see at least that he is acknowledging and being honest with himself about the pitfalls of this new way of broadcasting the show. But obviously the fact that he's acknowledging and addressing the pitfalls doesn't change the fact that clearly there are going to be some pitfalls here. To be honest, I mean, I'm in two minds. For me personally, selfishly, from a work perspective, on the way that we work with the ups and downs and things, I think the midnight release works in our favour. It means we are not having to work into the early hours of Sunday morning with trying to cover the ups and downs immediately after it broadcasts at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night. On the other hand, because of the nature of our work, you know, we are some of those people who social media is harder to avoid and spoilers are harder to avoid. So it's a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? So, you know, it works in our favour in some regards, doesn't work so great in our favour if we're not able to watch it directly as it releases on at midnight or wherever in the world. But I mean, it's a small price to pay, isn't it? We're getting new Doctor Who, and I think that's the main thing we need to focus on. Maybe all of us in the world could benefit from a little break from social media every once in a while.
Twitter.
While we are on the topic, though, of midnight streaming, the midnight streaming launch of these episodes, Russell did highly recommend that for the penultimate episode of the season, which is The Legend of Ruby Sunday, that you do watch it at midnight, because you don't want it to be spoiled. He said it's shocking, frankly, and there might be screaming. Now, it's the penultimate episode of the season, the first half of a 2-part finale, so yeah, I'm expecting it to be one hell of a cliffhanger. I don't think it's going to end very well for poor Ruby. I have a very bad feeling about Ruby. Don't know if things are going to go so well for her. We know she's in season 2, so look, she's not going to die. At least not in season 1. So that's a bonus, I guess. But yeah, judging by what Russell has said here, that one is one that he suggests if you can watch at midnight, or as soon as it is released, then do. So now let's move on to the biggest mystery in the show at the moment, or at least one of the biggest mysteries, which is Mrs. Flood. So also in this issue of the magazine, there is a lovely interview with Anita Dobson, which is well worth reading. Like I said, go get yourself a copy of the magazine. But there's just a few things in that interview that I think are worth mentioning. So one of those is that, yes, we will find out who she is and what's going on with her, but it will be a slow burn. To me, that sounds like the Mrs. Flood mystery is not going to be unpacked until at least season 2. I don't think slow burn means the end of season 1. I do not think we're going to learn much about Mrs. Flood by the end of season 1. So another interesting little tidbit actually might debunk a lot of fan theories about this character, and that is her name doesn't mean anything. Apparently, Russell T Davies was thinking of the secretary Miss Flood in the 90s British sitcom May to December, and he just liked the name Flood, hence Mrs. Flood. Now, understandably, people have been speculating galore since Christmas about who this character might be, and obviously with the name Mrs. Flood, people have trying to figure out if she's a pre-existing character, perhaps a Time Lord of some sort, and, you know, or maybe an old villain, and we've had speculation that the Rani, with the flood and Rani being, you know, you could rain, and also the meddling monk, or we've had suggestions that she's River Song because flood, river, you know, a lot of people have drawn from the name as to who this character might be, suggesting that it's a clue. Usually when that's the case, the character's name usually does actually mean something. You know, if you think about Missy is the kind of feminine version of Master, or Professor Yana, meaning you are not alone. But the fact here that Russell just gave Mrs. Flood a random name, I think that's a clue that she's actually an original character, not a pre-existing character. Now, of course, that could absolutely be wrong, and that's okay. In fact, I'd be quite happy to be proved wrong with any of these theories, because if I've been proved wrong, it means that the show has surprised me. And there is no greater feeling than watching something and it really throwing something at me that I really didn't see coming. I think that is when a show is at its best. When it throws in a twist that absolutely blows your mind. And obviously the nature of what we do, you know, we're speculating all the time. And sometimes we theorise and they're correct, such as my theory about Maestro emerging from within the piano. And sometimes it's like, yes, I got that right. Sometimes with something as mysterious as who is Mrs. Flood, I want to be surprised. So I'm very excited to see how this whole mystery unfolds and who this character turns out to be. We have had so many videos covering season 1 as a whole, so we've been really kind and we've compiled a playlist for you here on YouTube with all our videos pertaining to season 1. So if you've missed any or you want to go back and check something, then they're all available for you in one playlist because we're just nice like that. Look after yourselves, we haven't got long to wait at all. I'm very excited. And we get 2 episodes in the first week, so oh my god, it's so exciting. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.